Hello, welcome friends. This is Ed Strachar, and as you know, I've talked about the topic of genius many, many times. I've written Into the Genius Zone, where I had the incredible opportunity to meet geniuses in the area of money, finance, sport, music, art, creativity, and learning. Reading Genius, where I've trained many of the fastest readers in the world, and one of my greatest mentors in the area of genius, Alexander Everett, founder of many schools, who's now passed on the other side, taught me that genius, one of the definitions is tapping into the natural brilliance within us. That's right. Genius comes from within. So I am thrilled today to share with you a fascinating individual, Mr. Peter Sage from the United Kingdom. Peter is a genius in the area of business. He started over 24 companies, several companies worth many, many millions of dollars in the area of health, solar energy, solar power. Peter is now a platform speaker and elite business coach and knows a lot with respect to getting businesses started, how they work, and some higher principles that we're going to talk about. Peter, welcome. Really a pleasure to have you on.
Ed, the pleasure really is mine. And one of the things that I enjoy so much about what it is that I get the opportunity to do now is to be able to connect with amazing people. And I have to say, having met so many people during the course of what I do, I was excited about this because you really stand out for me as an incredible individual. I mean, not only are you one of the world's most powerful healers and at a remote distance across the ocean, I mean, that's how we really got together. I experienced what it is that you did firsthand. I mean, I've always been a fan of your work. I'll say that up front, from many years ago when I was actually first exposed to some of your programs way back. And, I consider it full circle to be able to, for you and I to be able to connect at the level we have. And I'm very blessed to that. I mean, you have such an amazing ability. And talk about genius. If there was a category of being a genius at being a genius, you'd probably be there.
Well, here's what I noticed, Peter, and I appreciate all those accolades. I got to record them and send them to my ex-wife and family members because they're not going to believe any of that. But the reality is a gem cannot be polished without friction, right? Mm-hmm. And when I created Into the Genius Zone, the thing that was fascinating was listening. I remember interviewing Dr. Jeanette Voss, who's the author of The Learning Revolution, and she got fired from a school, being a school teacher, for introducing accelerated learning principles. Michael Jordan, we know the famous story of how he got cut from the team. Einstein, his early difficulties with math. This is part of the process, and I'm no different. And I'm thrilled to talk to you here and to share with our audience some of the fascinating things that we have gone through. So you're a business coach. When I created Reading Genius 2.0 and went into tremendous troubles where it seemed like nothing I tried would work and I went into great financial difficulty, I could almost feel something supernatural working against me. Everyone thought I was crazy. They told me to, set my goals higher and change this and, be nicer. Don't be so direct. Don't be so blunt. All these pieces of advice. And what I had learned on these higher dimensions, the spiritual realm, which is how I got into being a spiritual healer and understanding this whole concept of power, which, you shared with me before how your mother was a judo champion. And so you understand this concept of power. And in athletics, we understand it. In spirituality, we don't. But having the power to impact at the spiritual level not only impacts health, but it can impact business. And I'm curious, I'd love for you to share a little bit to the audience about, A, what you do with respect to entrepreneurship and business, and then through our interaction, what you learned in the spiritual dimension and how it can add to someone's success in business.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that lead up, Ed. I remember just going back to what you mentioned about my mom, and you just triggered a memory which I haven't thought of for many, many years. And it was when I was very, very small. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I was with my mom at a dojo, and she was explaining to me about this thing called chi, or energy, and she was explaining how some of the Aikido masters and the Japanese that she trained with had taught her how to use this energy, and how her father, who was kind of old school, my grandfather, thought it was all the typical, load of rubbish. People that tend to focus on the physical at the expense of ignoring the metaphysical, can tend to have blinkers on at that point. But, we know at every level, everything is energy. So when she was explaining it to a young 8-year-old, I was fascinated. I watched demonstrations of some of the Aikido and Judo masters root themselves to the ground and challenge some of the audience to come and try and lift them. These tiny little people that were rooted to the ground through this energy. So I was fascinated from a young age around that, and always knew that there was more to life than just what we see with or experience with the 5 physical senses, which kind of just limit our ability to interpret from the what we call the outer world. So when I first got into business, I dropped out of school at 16. I started my first business at 17 for really reasons of knowing that my mission in life, my purpose in life, was not to spend 40 hours a week working for somebody else and hopefully get through to a level of financial certainty where, the trade-off was I could put food on the table at the end of the week at the expense of giving my soul up for a path that I wasn't meant to walk. So, I got out of there and I got into business. I learned, many different lessons, along that journey of friction. And, one of those was that regardless of what happens in the business world, the inner world is what leads everything at that level. And the forces that affect the inner world, which, I'm sure we can get into at different levels, but the predominant one, obviously being our own sense of being able to get in touch and control that, is far more important than the kind of marketing campaign that you use, or the kind of, sort of price point you choose, or widget that you sell. And so, my first ever business was selling toys on the markets. As a 17-year-old kid, my catchphrase was Pete the Toy Boy. And, I remember I would sell the same toys in the same marketplace, at the same price point to the same demographic. And whether I was having a good day financially or a bad day and no customers came had nothing to do with the volume of footfall or the toys or the prices. They were all the same. But if I was in a positive, upbeat mood, I would sell more. If I was in a sort of low, downbeat mood, looking for reasons why the day sucked, I wouldn't sell more. And I really drew a correlation very quickly to that, to say, well, whoa, hang on a minute. You mean that by thinking and working on our internal world, in other words, the non-physical, the metaphysical, I affect the outer world? Wow. And that's what started me on my sort of quest, if you like, of deeper levels of personal development. And I was just fortunate that I was able to express that through the vehicle of what we call business.
Brilliant idea. Now, that you were in sales, selling in a mall. So it's I think most people could relate to salespeople that are bright and enthusiastic versus downbeat and less than confident or less than happy. What would you say to someone like me? Let's say we met 10 years ago and I said, Peter, I've created this great product. Everyone looks at it. They love it. Reading Genius 2.0. And all of a sudden, a deal starts flowing and then it falls apart. And this has happened like 10 times in a row. Knowing what you know now that you didn't know previous to us working together, what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, depending on their level of consciousness, I would certainly redirect their mindset away from trying to fix the outer world. Trying to blame themselves through something that they are not doing as a strategy, or blame the circumstances. When you understand how everything is connected, one has to understand that there are other forces at work, and whatever label you choose to put on that is down to yourself. But if you cannot go and clear the blocks that you have at an energetic level, then nothing in the outer world is going to flow. So my advice would be, what's blocking you? What do you feel? Is it a previous sense of unconscious resistance to abundance? Is it something that you're carrying as a level of negative or dark energy that is affecting your sort of vibrancy or your ability to shine your light. And there's many different places that can come from. But if somebody was open enough and they were trying all of the traditional things on the right marketing, the right this or that, how aligned are they at a quantum level to being able to channel that level of abundance, deal, frequency, etc. through? Because if they're not at the right frequency because something is lowering their energy, then they're only going to be able to attract corresponding circumstances. So again, it depends on their level of consciousness. People listening to this would probably have an open mind when it comes to understanding what we can prove in a science lab, but hasn't been taught in traditional education. So that would be my my first thoughts around being able to assess where they're at, how open they are, and whether they're going to continue banging their head against the wall, trying different outer world strategies or learning techniques or skills. Or are they willing to look deeper in the mirror and see what's actually blocking that?
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so now look, here's something that would be interesting. I'll tell you my take based on what I learned and how I developed these skills as a spiritual healer. You tell me how crazy that would sound to the average business person, right? Because the average business person thinks, in terms of finances, in terms of customers, in terms of deals, and they've got their feet on the ground. And what I learned, there are these things called energy fields. Now, the biggest energy field that we all know is called gravity. Gravity is an energy field, and it's pointed downward towards the Earth. Most people think the Earth pulls things down, but in actuality, it's forced down from the universe into the matter. Regardless, we don't see gravity, we don't feel it, but we know every time we drop something, that gravity exists. Now, you can fight gravity. You can throw a rock up in the air, right? But eventually that field will pull it back down. So when we have negative karma, this creates a negative energy field. And a negative energy field repels what you want and attracts what you don't want. And if you have negative karma with respect to money, for example, you, in that territory, will repel what you want and attract what you don't want. If you have negative karma with respect to, let's just say, personal relationships or whatever that may be, that can be created. Something else that can create a negative energy field is this old school idea of witchcraft and sorcery and creating a negative energy field around somebody so that they fail. And we've heard of witchcraft, we heard of sorcery. I've been a born-again Christian for 20-plus years, never really believed any of that stuff could affect me. And all of a sudden, everything starts going wrong, and nobody can understand it. They're looking at me saying, Ed, you're bright, you're energetic, you've got great ideas, you've made millions of dollars. What happened? And I had no answer. And then when I figured out this higher dimensional aspect of energy fields, and karma was one of them. Sorcery and curses were another. And what I learned beyond the concept of past lives, which, some people are aware of, some people are not aware of, call it belief or what have you. But certainly I know about them, and I've experienced and saw many of my past lives now. But that these energy fields, karma, curses, and so forth, can travel along the soul from lifetime to lifetime. And so things were coming back to me from previous lifetimes. I had to deal with that, and I was brought right to the brink, meaning went from a millionaire to a minus millionaire to not being able to pay any more rent. I had borrowed all the money I could possibly borrow from everyone I knew, and now it was a point where I kept getting visions of taking my own life. I couldn't understand what was going on, but this is where I was. And I remember my coach at the time, as I was telling him, and this is what was happening to me. I'd have 2 computer screens on my desk, and left computer screen would be my fun, sports pages. I played chess, chats with friends, Facebook, that kind of stuff. And the right screen would be all my work, books, websites, correspondence, and business. I'd go on the left screen and play, have my fun, read the sports pages and so on, feel fine. As soon as I go on the right screen, my head would get bombarded with negative images. I'd start getting tired. I said, wait a minute. I switched to the left screen, go play chess for 3 hours, not be tired and full of energy. I'm a chess player. go to the right screen, I get tired. And I said this to my coach. I said, what's going on here? He says, Ed, I don't know. He goes, well, when you break through this, something big is going to happen. I can just sense it. All right. So now if I came to you with that, how crazy does that sound to the average business person out there in your mind?
Well, let's see if we can use a bit of an analogy to help break something down, because what I find is that people tend to have a very fixed model of the world. And that model of the world is usually based upon all of their previous conditioning, environments, a lot down to the media, traditional education, all of the programming. As human beings, we are programmable by design. We don't get to choose whether or not we get programmed. We only get to choose how we are programmed. So, if somebody is indoctrinated to, as I said, only understanding their previous history and isn't open, then my experience is that they're going to think that all of that stuff you just mentioned is anywhere on a scale of crazy to you should be taking a different kind of happy pill. So and that's a shame, because every single discovery in science existed before science discovered it. So rather than just wait for a big rubber stamp, we have a built-in sense of what is true if we can get out of our thinking center and connect to our feeling center. And so, people are more open to that if we can try and shift it into terms, languages, or associations to open the door a little bit at a time, rather than kind of throw them down a corridor that they're not used to. So for me, one of the ways I try to explain that to people would be that, we're in the physical world. We're very familiar with the concept of power and force. So if you have an 8-stone weakling and you have somebody that's 6'5", weighs 220 and fit, if they've got more physical strength, they're going to dominate somebody who has less physical strength. Everybody can get that. But the physical world, as we now know, comes from the metaphysical world. There isn't a science lab or a credible science lab on the planet that doesn't know that for a fact. When you have a wave or a particle, that particle is collapsed from a wave, which means that what we see as low vibrational matter previously existed in the state of possibility of non-matter. Matter comes from non-matter, not the other way around. The physical is a result of the metaphysical going through a low vibrational transition that we call in science collapsing the waveform. So everybody is fairly au fait with that now. Mm-hmm. But if the physical comes from the metaphysical, then it makes sense that a lot of the laws that govern physical also govern metaphysical. So let's take that gym example, or the 220, 6'3" guy in the weakling. If you have somebody who is able to have bigger biceps in the metaphysical world, they will be able to dominate somebody in the metaphysical world who has smaller biceps. And if you can know how to direct that force, just like in the physical world, if it's a punch, if you can direct the metaphysical energy to somebody else who is weaker at that particular aspect, then we can call that a curse, we can call that a hex, we can call that dark spirits, what have you. But there are sorcery, witchcraft, and that, I believe, is the way that a lot of people could start to understand that if somebody has bigger metaphysical muscles, because that's a part of that they train, then how they use that against other people is exactly the same if somebody goes to the gym, builds big muscles, and uses that against somebody else. You can either be a bully or you can use it to lift people up. There's no difference. The only difference is intention. And unfortunately, in a world of 7 billion people, you're going to have some people that use that for the wrong level of intention.
Sure. And in fact, let me share it this way. This whole concept of vibes, people get vibes, right? People walk in, they got good vibes or bad vibes. I was looking for real estate, looking for a place to rent in a foreign country recently. And I'm with my assistant, and there's a real estate agent, and we go to this one particular building. It was a condo and a high-rise building, and we look at a few different units. And one of the units we walked into, boy, the girls all started getting tired, and you could just feel the dark, heavy vibes in this one particular condo. that we were going to rent. We get that from people. Now, we all know if people don't bathe and they smell, okay? Hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but as we know, it happens, okay? We know if people don't have good oral hygiene, they have bad breath. Well, what about this concept of energy? Okay, and not only is that concept of energy around us, but it's everything we do. So businesses we create, if they have good vibes, all right, it creates vibrance. And we know vibrance attracts. High energy attracts. Simple as that. Just like a light in a forest in the middle of the night, right? It attracts the animals, the insects, and so forth. And what happens when we don't have bright energy? So let me give you another example now. Numerous people have come to me, one in particular from England, and he said he just went through a bitter divorce with now his ex-wife. He was in Asia, Thailand to be exact, but he was from the UK. And he said everything started drying up. And a lot of people owed him money, and nothing seemed to be working, and he was getting bad dreams at night. I said to him, in the terms neutral here, you've got a negative energy field around you. Dramatic negative energy field. All right? Now, this is at higher dimensions that you cannot see in 3 dimensions. Okay? Some would call this witchcraft or a hex. All right? That's probably the common term. Black magic is another term. Get a process with him. We connect it to higher dimensions of love, because the universe really is put together by love. In fact, a famous letter that Albert Einstein wrote, his daughter, to be released later, talked about the fabric of the universe being love. Now, most people, when they think love, they think of Hollywood movies with 2 good-looking actors and actresses, getting it on in a bedroom. Well, that's what Hollywood wants you to think love is. It's not. Love is of the highest and best interest for all concerned. It comes through the heart. It doesn't come through the brain. And there are levels or dimensions to it, just like in heat, right? There's levels to heat. How much heat do you have? Well, is it, 50 degrees, 70 degrees, 500 degrees, right? There is levels to that heat. And you need to know that level. And, if you're going to heat a house, if you're going to go outside, are you going to wear a winter coat, or you're going to wear shorts and flip-flops, right? So when it comes to energy, the same thing. So this guy had a negative energy field around him. Remove the negative energy field. He felt brighter. He felt lighter. And the next day, literally, I met with him on a Sunday, met, meaning by Skype, really. Sunday, payments started coming in, and everything started flowing again. Negative energy field removed. I've seen this now a number of times, and I know with what I went through, that's what happened as well. Now, how crazy does that sound to an entrepreneurial expert like you?
Well, from my perspective, it makes perfect sense. Again, I see a lot of people spin their wheels because they're just focusing on the wrong aspect. Everything is energy. You teach that, Ed. It's Einstein's foundational level of insight. And you look at matter through the eyes of a scientist, through the eyes of a physicist. You don't see solid. It's like having a pebble on a string on the end of your finger, and if you spin it, and you spin it so fast you can't get your other finger through, the illusion is that you're hitting solid. But the reality, everything is vibrating at a certain frequency. And as we know, if you take a whole series of tuning forks, and I take one tuning fork and hit it, and you have a range that one of them matches mine, I don't need to know which it is. I just hit mine, and the tuning fork that matches that is in your set of tuning forks will automatically vibrate because it's on the same frequency. So if you have a negative energy field that is vibrating at a level of scarcity, a level of fear, then guess what? How far away from love and abundance and creativity are you vibrating? So, clearing negative energy fields is a prerequisite for being able to move forward and align with, as I say, the highest and best interest for all concerned. And if you have anything that's it's out of whack with that, you're going to have to deal with that as urgently as you are with an overdraft. It's the example I give is it's like if you go to the doctor because you have a bad knee. And doctors will do, traditional doctors, allopathic doctors will do what they're trained to do, which is prescribe drugs and recommend surgery. So you're going to have anti-inflammatories, you're going to have painkillers, and you're going to have rest. That's pretty much what they'll recommend. But if you go to somebody who's more holistic or not be focused on the knee, they'll take a bigger picture view. They'll start to say, well, hang on a minute, if you look at from a higher dimension, you've got a nerve in your shoulder that's kind of in spasm and it's chronic. You don't even notice it. Like most people don't notice the tension they carry in their forehead. So, if we work on that, because it's causing the shoulder to tighten, which is causing an imbalance on the hips, which is causing more pressure to go on one knee over time. So forget the knee and the painkillers and the anti-inflammatories. Let's treat the shoulder, and in a couple of weeks, your knee's going to be better. And a physical example, that's a way of being able to show people that where the pain is not where the pain is, not the cause of the pain. Whereas you go into a business and people say, oh, well, I need better time management. So teach me time management because I'm so busy I can't organize myself. When you peel back the onion, stop looking at the knee, you start looking at the shoulder. And the reason is that they have an inability to handle rejection, or they're a micromanager. And that's the issue you work on. And then guess what? The time management tends to dissolve because they have less on their plate because they now have the ability to say no. Now you take that a step further at an energetic level. And, people can start to see that most of the time in business, they're focused on the knee, not the shoulder. You start focusing your energy levels at a frequency of abundance. And guess what? You can ignore the overdraft for a while because, more clients, more paying clients are starting to come if you clear those levels of blocks rather than dealing with the painkillers that most people do, which is run another advertising campaign, for example. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely, it makes sense. So how would you advise in 1 minute or less them to focus on the frequency of abundance?
Gratitude is probably the fastest way to get somebody out of a low vibration. Now, love is definitely the most powerful, but the challenge with getting people to try to focus on love is that they have so little references for what real love is that it's hard for them sometimes to associate. So gratitude is like a next best thing. And all you need to do is recognize that true wealth is nothing more than the perception of abundance. How can you tap into abundance? Well, recognize the abundance that's around. It's not about a bank account. Do you have an abundance of oxygen to breathe? Do you have an abundance of freedom to be able to walk around and move your body? Do you have abundance in many areas of your life you're choosing to ignore because your rule says that in order to feel abundant, it's got to show up as a Ferrari in my garage. So, abundance is the natural flow of nature. The apple doesn't produce one pip. The tree doesn't produce one apple. Abundance is everywhere. So all we need to do is unlearn what we've learned, as our wise master Yoda would say, and tune into the natural frequency that you were born with. And so, gratitude is a great way to be able to do that as a fast track. That would be my, first recommendation.
Wonderful.
Is a great way to be able to do that as a fast track.
Let me share
that would be my
what I have learned.
First recommendation.
And I'm curious as to your take on it because you use very interesting language, very contrasting to how I would describe it. And I think for the listener listening to this, getting both, they're able to derive their own conclusion based on their own experience as well as what we're sharing here. I often talk about spirit. And when you mention the word spirit, I remember talking to a publisher. They said, don't talk about spirit because nobody knows what you mean. Some people think you're talking about religion. Some people think you're talking about ghosts. And you confuse people and can attract the wrong audiences. And it's a bad word to use in marketing and a bad word to use in titles. But we know everything is energy, right? That we know. And I'm amazed now, even the average 15-year-old knows everything is energy. This principle, which I certainly wouldn't have known when I was 15, has predominated. But what controls the energy? What controls the energy is a spirit. Okay, so think of a balloon. You have the air inside the balloon, and we can say air is everywhere, right? But the balloon, the mylar, controls the spirit. So you have a frog, you have a turtle. They're both pure energy, and for the most part, the same energy. They have the same organs, liver, kidneys, and so forth, head, eyes, and yet one has the spirit of a turtle, one has the spirit of the frog. You're Peter Sage, I'm Ed Strachar. We're both pure energy, same liver, kidneys, lungs, and so forth, different proportions and body sizes, voices, but the reality is we're the same energy. However, you have the spirit of Peter Sage in this lifetime, and I have the spirit of Ed Strachar. You follow? So now, let's come to business. Just like fire and water cannot simultaneously exist. Cannot simultaneously exist in the same spot. Neither can prosperity or poverty. When I worked with that individual, his name was David from the UK, the gentleman I mentioned before, who was living in Thailand, just got through a divorce. The spirit of poverty was all around him. We transformed that through connecting to higher energy fields to the spirit of prosperity. And the spirit of poverty and the spirit of prosperity cannot simultaneously exist. The spirit of hate and the spirit of love cannot simultaneously exist. Right? So transforming this energy, and everything is energy, and all energy can be transformed, provided, of course, you have enough power. So if we take an ice cube, well, you can transform that to steam. We all know that. You heat it up. You provide power. You have a 50-pound suitcase in one room. You want to move its location. If you have the power, you can pick it up and move it. If you don't have the power, you can't. Well, okay. Yeah. You have the spirit of poverty. If you have the power, you can transform it. If you don't have the power, you can't. You have the spirit of disease, right? We know that. I think people say, I caught a cold, I catch a disease. Well, the reality is that dis-ease has a power level to it. And if you have the power, you can remove it. If you don't have the power level, you can't. And as you said, people will try with the drugs and surgeries, but if you don't remove the spirit of the disease, it keeps coming back. So you mentioned a bad knee, right? And I think you and I both know one person I healed the knees of, right? And I've healed a lot of knees now. Now, I do this over the phone. Few people can believe it. That's okay. I love breaking new ground. Knee has a spirit. And the spirit of the knee knows how to repair the knee. The knee is a living thing. It is not like a transmission in a car made an assembly line with raw inanimate objects. But people would still argue, well, that transmission is pure energy and there's a spirit there. Yes, it is. It's not as animate and as life-flowing in our terms as a knee. Knee has a spirit, and the spirit of the knee knows how to repair the knee. And if that knee is injured, bashed, or whatever, that knee spirit is quite weak. Restore the spirit of the knee and energize it, just like taking a flat balloon that's been shattered and repairing it and filling it full of air, all of a sudden the knee comes back. Make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Right? Yes. And this is what can happen. So, one of my favorite companies, Apple Computer. I used to live in the Silicon Valley, right around the corner from Apple headquarters, and of course, use their products and use the Macintosh when it first came out and so forth. And we watched Apple thrive, and the founder, who was really the spirit of the company, Steve Jobs, he got evicted from the company. The company went into free fall, had numerous CEOs giving nice speeches, but the spirit of the company was really low. He came back and reinvigorated the spirit of the company, okay, with excellence and with real hardcore pedal to the metal craftsmanship and thriving on creating something great. And that's it's the biggest, most valuable company now, and everyone knows or uses an iPhone. And certainly Mac computers are out there. He brought the spirit of innovation right to that company where it wasn't there before, despite all the nice features. So, Peter, how do people learn more about you? I know you run something called the Millionaire Business School. Tell us a little bit more about, if people want to get a hold of you, how they can.
The website is petersage.com. Everything can be found on there. And yes, I run an event which I'm very proud of called the Millionaire Business School, and it's a little bit of a sucker punch because, although I teach people how to, become very abundant and prosperous using business techniques, out of the 3 days, and I'm sure it comes as no surprise to people listening to this now, having heard what we've spoke about, the first day is all about clearing the inner world blockages. It's all about being able to get you to a different level of vibration, clearing some of the patterns that show up as self-sabotage, building the metaphysical biceps and showing people how to really make some fundamental shifts at that level. Once that's done, once you've scraped the rust away, then you can apply the new paint. So day 2 and 3, we talk business. We talk strategies on how to 10x a company without spending any money. How to be able to start a company from scratch and take it through to 7 figures in 12 months. We've got so many testimonials and so many people that have done incredible things through that. But I'm most proud of the shifts that they make personally. Forget the money. Money is a byproduct or a consequence of adding value. And therefore, it makes sense that in order to be able to add value, more of who you are needs to show up, not, charge more for your product. So, allowing people to show up as more of who they are allows them to become wealthy, not just in business, in relationships, in health, in spirit. And so, that's really what I've spent my passion, sort of creating this event. It's always evolving. We have a lot of people that take it, more than once because they get so much out of it. And it'd be a pleasure if people want to check that out to go have a look and be able to shake my hand in person. It would be I'd be very humbled to be able to do that.
Wonderful. And that's Peter Sage, SAGE.com.
Correct.
Is that correct? Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, look, it's been a pleasure having you. I look forward to learning more. You and I come from, we understand a lot of similar principles, but we have such different ways to explain it. So in the next podcast that you and I have, why don't we talk more about the spirit energy business? We'll throw in some prosperity principles there so that people who are listening to this, if they want to learn more, they can hear. And I'd love to arrange that with you if you're open to it.
Absolutely. I think it would be great. I think that you and I have very complementary ways of being able to explain the fundamental truth that we're both very dialed into. And if there's a way that people listening can get some benefit from that sort of crossover, then I think you and I have a beautiful opportunity to try and add some value to people out there, to open their eyes to something that traditional mainstream teaching is just 180 degrees away from. And if we can do that and help just one person listening, then you and I both know that's what we're here for.
Good. And in fact, in that next show, I want to create an energy field between you and I. And I'm currently in Asia. You're in the UK. We're going to create an energy field, a positive one, a powerful one that can help clear discordant or dark energies from people who are listening. So let's do that. And Peter, really a pleasure connecting with you again. Thank you so much.
You too, Ed. Always a pleasure. And I'm excited for what we're doing. And nothing really allows people a belief faster than an experience. So, let's promise them an experience next time we get together, like you said, and I'm sure people are going to really enjoy it.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. Take care.
You too.